Really good to see everybody. Today we're going to talk about UX and TV. This is a new area in digital that we're really excited about. So we just want to kind of share what we're hearing about in the connected TV space, and then talk about the role of usability professionals in all of this. In case you're wondering, just a little bit of background for both of us. So I'm an experience director here at Razorfish. In the past, I've worked at RGA. I worked for a startup company that focused on web TV convergence for about 5 years, called WebNow, based in New York. And I also worked at Moto Media, and I was a graphic designer, art director, and made the transition to usability and user experience about 10 years ago. And my passion and focus has really been on emerging technology, making emerging technology usable. So I've been focused on mobile, tablet, social, etc. And some of my clients include a wide range, from Axe to Citibank to Ralph Lauren. And if you want, you can follow me on Twitter and pass it over to Ed.
Hi. So my name is Ed Mansfield. I'm also a colleague of Kyle here at Razorfish. So my background in UX goes approximately 10 years. I originally started at Chase Bank Financial Services before coming over here to Razorfish. So some of my clients over the years include Ford Motor Company, XM Radio, which is now Sirius XM, Merrill Lynch, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley. And some of my interests that I developed over the past few years here involve also emerging media and technology, tablets and mobile phones several years ago. Currently, I think I'm a bit more passionate about things like multi-screen and second screen interaction, which is very, very closely tied to smart televisions.
Okay, so I think part of the reason why we're all here is that we might be frustrated with the user experience of television. So, let's face it, the experience is kind of broken. And there are several reasons for this. Feel free to add to these, but my personal complaints are that there are too many remotes operating too many different kinds of devices, 1,000 channels and nothing on. So you'll see a theme going through here. There's sort of like a hardware interaction and content strategy implications. Clunky channel guides that were designed 20 years ago, lack of device compatibility, constant interruptions, includes advertising, and the list goes on. But there's kind of good news. When you look at mobile's a great example. So mobile, the experience was really pretty bad. This wasn't that long ago. So I recall days when clients really had a hard time envisioning their brand on a web browser, right? That was really a tough sell. That, of course, all changed with the iPhone, and then that basically set the standard going forward. So you have Android, and then the new Windows. So there's hope there. I want to go out on a limb and designate Steve Jobs as the patron saint of user experience. At least he's kind of my idol in that area. It got me interested in this field to begin with, just because of his insights into what makes a good customer experience. But his next target after desktop and mobile was TV. And his mission was he was going to solve that. And of course, he passed away last year, and he left some details with his biography. And we'll go into some of that a little bit later because it's really tantalizing what could happen in this space if Apple took a leadership role. So, who's going to change TV? I would suggest that we will. And as we go through the presentation, I want to talk about how we can insert ourselves into the process. And I would also suggest that TV is the next big problem for user experience to solve after mobile and desktop. So how do we do this? Two ways, and this is really going to be the focus of the presentation today, but basically what we want to talk about is just give you an overview of what's going on in the connected TV landscape. Many of you might already be aware of this. It might be a little bit of a refresher. And then also start a dialogue around how we get the skills to do it. And so there are 5 parts to this. The first part is going to be the rise of connected TV. So we're just going through definition of how we define about connected TV and the stats. The war for the living room. We'll talk about the key players and an elephant that's in the living room. We'll talk about the implications for user experience, and that will include challenges with TV, designing for TV, and also opportunities. And then we'll also talk about how we get started with this, and that will involve things like prototyping, evangelization within your organization or with your clients. And then we'll wrap that up with some takeaways. So first off, with the rise of connected television, it would probably make sense for us to just define it first. So this is as good a definition as any. It comes from Wikipedia, but that's basically what all of the manufacturers pretty much agree on. And that's that it's a term used to describe the integration of internet and web features into TV sets and set-top boxes, as well as the convergence between computers and these television sets or set-top boxes. So what's interesting is it doesn't have to be TV enabled. It doesn't have to be internet enabled TV sets. It can also be your set-top box or even a memory stick that you plug in and make your dumb TV smart. So it has a pretty broad definition. It's also known by several other names. Basically, this means the same as smart TV, cloud TV, or hybrid TV. So, why should we, usability professionals, really care about this right now?
So that's actually a very good question, Kyle. We've been talking about web TV convergence for years, right? Ever since Microsoft Media Center launched in 2002, at least a decade, we've been sort of toying around with this idea. So, we have to ask ourselves, aren't the standards already set and created? Perhaps, but there's always room for improvement. And to paraphrase William Gibson, he said, connected TV is already here. It's just not very widely distributed, and I have to say, yet. So I'm a bit of a stats junkie. I love reading user research. I love checking out what the trends are. It helps me validate work that I've done, and it helps me forecast things going forward. So what I want to do, at least for the next few slides, is to go through some stats to at least reinforce in everyone's mind how important this is. So we have to ask ourselves, why should we care about this right now? And I have no other better way of saying it, but it's kind of a big deal, period. So we're at a point now where millions of people are already connected, or at least they have the capability of being connected. 2006 and 2005 is when we started seeing the new generation of video game consoles hit the market. So we're looking at 227 million people who have a connected, enabled television in their living room today. Whether they are using it or not is a completely different story, but at least this gives us an idea that there's a base for us to tackle. Okay? Now let's talk about actual connected television sets and sales for that. So the past few years, I think the sales have been pretty modest. 40 million, I think, in 2010, 65 last year. The projection for 2012 is 90 plus million units sold by the end of this year. And keep in mind, that's only 40% of the actual market of TV sales that's going on flat panel displays. Jump ahead to 2016, we're looking at an 80% market share. So 4 out of 5 televisions will have the ability to connect to the internet. And if we were to crunch the numbers, and I won't go through the math terribly here, but we're basically looking at around 900 million households with a connected TV by 2016. So this is exactly why we're here today talking about this. We're sort of at the forefront of this trend, much like how we were back several years ago with mobile phones and that sort of stuff. So I know I fall into this category as well, and I just want to take a quick poll here, but does this resonate? Does this stat resonate with some people here? Do we multitask when we're watching television? I would say so, right? So there was a joint Yahoo and Razorfish study that was performed fairly recently, and what we discovered was that 80% of Americans multitask while watching television. So that includes things like eating, having dinner, but primarily it also includes things like communicating with your friends. So instant messenger, SMS, other forms of communication. And it also involves web browsing, or browsing social media sites for additional information and that sort of stuff. So what we're seeing here with this particular trend in our user behavior of broadcast viewers is we're actually, I guess you could say, there's no Gen Y, there's no Gen X, we're all Gen ADD at this point, right? So another trend that I want to point out is the number of people who are actually cutting their cable subscriptions, cutting the cord as you will. So between the years of 2008 and 2010, about 2.5 million people basically broke up with their cable company. Now, mind you, that's not a terribly significant number if you consider the overall population of cable subscribers, but I think this is at the forefront of the trend that people are realizing that they're able to consume their video content through other channels, not just through their cable networks. And of course, things like that, it's a little more cost efficient. So we're going to see this number actually jump, I predict, within the next year or so. Another trend, which is actually very interesting to me and to Kyle, is the appetite that we all have for video streaming content, especially when it comes to live streaming. So historically, I think we've been talking about video streaming as in movies and TV shows that you can watch whenever you want to watch it. But something interesting has been coming out the past few years, and that's how people are actually turning to the internet, turning to their mobile phone, their tablets, to watch live content as opposed to on their television set through their cable network channels. I think one of the first events that actually highlighted this was the World Cup back in 2010. 1.6 billion, I believe, watched that through the internet. The next groundbreaking event was the royal wedding. I'm not sure if people watched that, whether you watched it on your television or on the internet, but 2.4 million watched that event live. Now, mind you, for the World Cup and for the royal wedding, there were heaps more people who watched it on television. I'll give you guys that. Now, the third one, which is very recent, it was the Mars Curiosity landing, which happened, I guess, several weeks ago. 3.2 million people watched that on their phone or on their PC. Now, that event was actually very notable because this was the very first time in television history where more people watched a live event on the internet than they actually watched on any cable network channel. So as you can see over the past few years, our appetite for live content streaming has been increasing, and we've been slowly migrating away from, I guess, being handcuffed to our cable providers. So I think timing is actually pretty perfect here. How could we not talk about the Olympics in this topic, right? So the 2012 Olympics was pretty monumental in terms of streaming video and content. And Kyle and I watched it fairly closely, and not necessarily some of the events like trampolining and things like that, but we watched it to see how people reacted to it. Mind you, there was the NBC fail hashtag that was sort of very popular for a while. But as the Olympic events closed and we started to see some more numbers, what we discovered was that 40% of Americans actually watched the Olympics on their tablets, on their phones, on their PCs, and some may even have watched it on their TVs, right? So, I mean, I think we can all appreciate that. I know I watched it, especially because of the time difference between London and New York. The only way that I could watch, the preliminary rounds of badminton was sitting at my desk with my tablet next to me. Now, the other interesting fact that came out of the Olympics was the propensity for people who actually viewed live stream. They were twice as likely to watch the tape-delayed broadcast later that evening, which was kind of surprising. I mean, if you watched live during the day, why would you need to watch the tape delay at night? But I think the key takeaway here is we're not really talking about TV broadcast versus streaming broadcast. I think what we're talking about is how streaming video, whether it's on your tablet or your mobile phone or your smart TV, it's all part of the ecosystem of normal viewers. We all want to watch what we want to watch, when we want to watch, and how we want to watch. And so I think this is sort of what's happening in our industry currently. So this has all caught the attention of some really big players in the industry. I think the Olympics was a very good test case for everyone in the industry to see if it was going to work or not. And I think NBC and I think Kyle and I agree that for the most part it was actually very, very huge. It was a huge success in terms of welcoming and adopting and embracing this type of technology. And so we're going to start seeing more of this in the future, I predict. So let's talk a little bit about some of the key players who are involved in this revolution as we're labeling it today. So we certainly have to talk about the television manufacturers, right? So television manufacturers have the biggest stake in this particular market. As I mentioned earlier, we're talking 900 million televisions sold by 2016. Multiply that by $1,000, $2,000, however it is. We're talking a really huge chunk of change that's at stake here for these manufacturers. And Samsung and LG have been at the forefront of this revolution. Sony is a little bit, I'm not sure what they're trying to do. They're still trying to figure out what their game plan is. But in any case, some of the things that we're seeing coming out of these manufacturers as far as features are concerned include things like inherent and embedded ability to view live stream video directly through the television and not necessarily connecting a box to it. Another feature is around I forgot what the other feature was. But in any case, the idea was, or the idea that's being permeated throughout the industry is that manufacturers are always trying to one-up each other in terms of getting the best product out there, which ultimately helps us as consumers of this product and to get what I mentioned before, what we want, when we want it, and however means we want it. The second group of manufacturers that I want to talk about are the game console manufacturers. So we're talking about the Xbox 360s, the Wii's, and the PS3s. So they actually have the biggest stake here in terms of losing ground. One point that I want to make, currently, as of this year, the Nintendo Wii is the granddaddy of connected television. Approximately, I think 32-ish% of connected TV viewers are using their Wii to consume content, right? And that's because they've been around, and as well as the PS3, they've been around for about 6 years, and they've positioned themselves as a home entertainment system, which includes that sort of stuff. So now they're competing against these television manufacturers for that same space in your living room. Another player in this battle for your living room are the set-top box manufacturers. And I would consider them more of a secondary player, but they're very important for one major reason. I purchased my television, I think, perhaps 3 or 4 years ago, and I'm sure some of you may have recently purchased a television which may not have connectivity. So to bridge that gap, these entities, like Roku, are developing products that allow you to convert your dumb television into a smart television, right? So when I say 2016, we've got 900 million connected TVs in the market. We can probably multiply that by however many devices these entities sell to people who have dumb televisions. So that number is actually extremely high, and I think even some of the features that these entities or these devices have is, I could probably say that we can't really call them set-top boxes anymore. Like Roku, for instance, their latest device is actually the size of a pack of gum that basically plugs into your HDMI port. So mobility in that regard is actually pretty cool. You can convert your living room into a smart TV and then go to your bedroom and basically carry over the exact same content that you were just watching. Content providers are also watching this industry, mainly because without content, smart TVs become a very irrelevant piece of machinery in your living room, because you need one and the other to actually fully immerse yourself in this experience. So entities like Netflix, which has been a major champion in this regards. In fact, I don't recall, or I don't know of any device that does not have Netflix on it. I mean, even your old BlackBerry can get a Netflix app on that. So they've actually been very strong in that area. But even more interesting, what we're starting to see is that some of these content providers are providing exclusive content only through their streaming service. Netflix, for instance, they've given rebirth to a TV show. I'm not sure if some of you know this, but it's called Arrested Development. It was very popular back, I guess, a few years ago. It was canceled abruptly, and I think there were petitions to get it back on the air. But Netflix listened, and so they've restarted Arrested Development for 2013, but exclusively through their streaming channel. So they're basically bypassing the cable networks and providing all of us what we've been asking for. And HBO is also the same realm by providing box sets of TV shows like Game of Thrones, Boardwalk Empire directly to their streaming service and bypassing, or at least delaying, their DVD box sets within stores and Amazon.com. And the last set of players to think about are the cable providers. Are they nervous? Probably not. I mean, they have hundreds of millions of subscribers currently. They lose a million here or there. It's not going to really hurt their bottom line. But I think they are forecasting within the next half decade that a lot of people are going to be cutting the cord and migrating over towards a connected television experience where they're streaming content directly from YouTube and Netflix. So what are they doing about this? So they're jumping into the fray as well. They're providing cable subscribers with set-top boxes which pretty much mimic the smart television experience. In fact, I think there was some recent news about Apple sort of jumping into that fray and offering or licensing a version of Apple TV set-top box to cable providers in several markets. So they're aware of this, and they certainly don't want to lose. So I'm going to pass this back over to Kyle because I have been neglecting to talk about a major player in this space, which I think deserves at least several minutes of discussion. And I think Kyle has a few thoughts on I think we all know what we're talking about.
Yeah, so one of the big questions is where's Apple in all of this? So they've talked about the current Apple TV as basically just a hobby for now, right? So it's nowhere close to the grand vision that Steve Jobs had outlined. To dig a little bit deeper and to explain why this is such an exciting thing for industry pundits and Mac fanboys, recently, when the biography came out by Walter Isaacson, there was a quote in it that was very striking in that Steve Jobs had basically claimed to have cracked the user experience problem. And basically what he envisioned was a new kind of TV that had the simplest user experience possible. No more messy wires and remotes. And the programming would basically be saved in the cloud. And so there was this grand vision leading a lot of people in the industry, particularly in the tech industry, to guess that they were basically going to build a TV on their own, doing the hardware and the software side of it. And that has led this sort of cottage industry of designers who are creating concepts of what the mythical iTV could be. This is one artist's rendering, but if you do a Google search, you'll find several of these. And basically, there's a lot of passion for what Apple might do in this space among the Mac customer base. But as Ed is pointing out, it's probably going to be something a little bit more like this, where it's just a cable set-top box that's provided to the operators that allows you to combine live television and also a DVR that runs through the cloud. and the interface is likely to be very similar to what you have with the iPad or the iPhone. So the source of all this, this was late breaking news this week, but this came from an article in the Washington Post, and it's generated a lot of excitement. At the same time, there was a little bit of a disappointment in that it didn't quite reach that vision of a new TV set. But no one really knows fully what their plans are. The main hope, I think, for all players in this industry was that Apple would bring some kind of much-needed standardization. So without someone like Apple to step in and create standards, we have a very fragmented television ecosystem to contend with. So this leads us to the next section, implications for UX. And you might be wondering as we go through this, we're talking about a lot of stats, a lot of technology, but what does this really mean for usability professionals? And to begin with, we're going to want to talk about the 10-foot experience. So for those of you not familiar with this term, it's a term that describes the user interface or display on a large television using the remote control as a primary interaction device. While there are similarities with mobile and tablet design, the 10-foot experience is a completely different beast. And in this next section, we're going to talk about the challenges and opportunities.
Okay, so we have some background in the industry. We have some background and knowledge about the growth. Hopefully we've sold you on this, but now it's time to really get roll up our sleeves and start to understand how we as UX practitioners can tackle this issue and really be at the forefront of this revolution going forward. So what I want to present to you guys are 5 things to consider. Most of this stuff is really around strategic planning. How do we immerse ourselves in this space for our clients, for our organization? So let me give you 5 things to consider as we're developing this strategy. The first one is to just be aware of the environment that a user will actually use or engage or interact with a smart television. So several years ago, I moved into a new apartment, and so I had boxes stacked to the ceiling. I had furniture that's strewn around the apartment, and the very first thing that I did was try to figure out where I was going to put my television. And in my mind, I felt that all of my other pieces of furniture, my couch, my coffee table, my dining table, all of that was dictated by the positioning of where my television was. So if we think about that, and I hope I'm not the only one who did that as well when they moved into their house. But when we think about that from a user experience perspective, we need to think about a television or a connected television as the centerpiece of the living room. So I want to tell you guys or reveal a term that's in the industry, and it's called lean back experience. Does anyone know what that means? Okay, so a few people do. So that's in contrast to a lean forward experience. A lean forward experience is typically associated with your PC. You're sitting at your desk, you're hunched over, you have your hand on one hand on your mouse, one hand on your keyboard, and you're exploring, you're discovering, you're searching, you're very engaged. Lean back, which I guess I would normally call the couch experience. Think about that. You're sitting down, you're leaning back, your feet's kicked up, and you're more likely to say, TV, show me something, right? You're not as engaged as you would normally be on a PC. So that's really what we're talking about when we're saying, just keep in mind the environment that we're creating for. We need to create applications or TV optimized sites that are focused on a more of a lean back behavior of common users. The other bit, as we're thinking about the living room, is the idea that we're no longer creating a one-on-one experience for users on your PC. It's typically you and the interface especially for your mobile phone, it's you and that interface. A television in your living room, we're actually dealing with potentially multiple viewers and multiple individuals who are interacting with that television. So these are new challenges, and so just keep in mind, I'm sure we all have televisions that we can relate to this, but as we start thinking about our long-term strategy in this space, think about what the users are doing in their living room. The second consideration to think about is just the physical constraints of a television. So most TVs tend to be larger, or at least larger than what we would have for our PCs. Definitely larger than our tablets, and especially our mobile phones. Now, a larger real estate doesn't necessarily mean you can cram as much content in that space as possible. If you think about it, and Kyle talked about the 10-foot experience, the farther away you get from your viewing screen, the larger the font has to be, and the clickable items has to be larger. So in reality, the real estate that we're able to play with is quite small compared to a desktop interface. And I would probably liken it more to a tablet experience. I think that's a very, very similar experience where you're dealing with a small real estate with big blocky buttons and so on. The third consideration, so let's talk about just the display rules for a minute. Some of this is fairly obvious. So I talked about the 10-foot experience and having font sizes being a little bit larger than you would expect on a PC. We definitely want to have larger calls to action and buttons. And the other thing is about the coloration. So I think historically we've been trained to realize that on PC interfaces, dark text on a white background seems to make more sense. There's more readability to that. It's actually quite the opposite for televisions. It's more effective if the typefaces are white, colored on a black background. So those are some of the design considerations that we have to think about. The fourth consideration is appreciate and understand the type of content that you want to present on your TV. And we have a photo of I guess that's a Kindle or some type of a Kindle. The best example that I can think of is ask yourself this question: Would you read War and Peace on your television set? I probably wouldn't. I would rather have the device in my hand, and I think that's where the Kindle and iPad excels. Vice versa, the key strength of a television set is in broadcasting videos, especially in technology today, high definition videos. So as you start thinking about a strategy for your organization, for your clients, think about the type of content that makes the most sense in this medium. We definitely want to encourage video displays, or at least animation, and also things like sound. And the last consideration within this space is, and I think for us is quite possibly the most important one, is the interaction mechanisms for using a television. Historically, and even in current connected TVs today, the primary tool for navigating, the primary tool for selecting and even entering in type is through the remote control, which I personally, as a UX practitioner, hate. I've hated it since I was a kid. I hate it now. There's too many buttons. And so we have to deal with things like that as we are preparing interaction designs in this space. Is, how do we create an interaction or an experience that can leverage such a weak interaction tool like this? So at this point, so I've listed out 5 things to consider when you're developing your smart TV strategy. So now let's talk about some opportunities on top of that, right? So these are things that are relatively unique to the space, and they're differentiators when we're comparing this to mobile or tablets. So the first opportunity within the space, and here we go again, the interaction mechanisms for using a television. I think everyone agrees, and even television manufacturers agree, that the remote control it has to work. Like, we gotta put it in. So what we've seen in things like the Wii, things like the Xbox Kinect, consumers were all appreciating and adopting, and we understand gesture and physical commands to interact with a different device. And some manufacturers are even going that far, and I'm pretty sure that some sets sold today actually have this technology built in. We've also learned from Siri that voice commands can actually be very popular and a little bit more intimate for users. So a lot of manufacturers are also entertaining the idea of using voice commands to navigate their way through an interface. So, just to reiterate, as we're thinking about prototypes and interfaces for us, consider these new types of technologies to actually engage the users and to have them interact with their space. The second opportunity is around this social and community viewing. This is a bit of a no-brainer. We all know that people multitask when they're interacting, and there's great opportunities there for content providers, perhaps even normal clients, to embrace this as they're interacting with a television set. They're also able to engage with their peers who have similar interests in what they're engaging. So some entities like Now by Yahoo are providing that directly in their apps. You can watch television or broadcast and simultaneously interact with other individuals. Entities like Vigil and GetGlue go as far as to provide rewards for watching certain broadcasts, especially duration of broadcasts. So, as you start thinking about your strategy, definitely consider integrating more social interaction in that space as well. The third opportunity is to think about providing niche content to your users. We're obviously talking a lot about video streaming, but this content can also apply to things like financial services and perhaps the automotive space, for instance. Content providers like YouTube, for instance, are doing extremely well by providing very, very niche channels in their platforms. So in other words, as I had mentioned, I think very early on, as consumers, we want to consume content when and where and how we want to. So YouTube, for instance, is doing very well with their channel, which is very, very curated to a very specific audience. So in theory, on your smart television, you can actually pull up the Tony Hawk skateboarding channel and consume that content and perhaps switch over to a very, very narrow cooking channel. And I mentioned earlier that Netflix is also curating very, very specific content to their online viewers that a broadcast viewer can't necessarily consume. The fourth consideration for all of us is to just appreciate and respect the notion of placing an app or a game on people's television sets, very similar to how we are doing it currently for mobile devices. The good news is that most of my clients, and I'm assuming most of yours as well, have already ventured into this space. So as opposed to reinventing the wheel, starting from scratch, we could easily leverage our existing digital properties in the mobile space, for apps, things like that, and convert that into a more of a smart television experience. So fortunately, I think for us, the leap from mobile to connected televisions is not quite as steep as we may have thought before this presentation. And the last opportunity that I want to talk about is this notion of personalization, this notion of recognition and it's kind of scary, it's kind of minority reportage that your TV can actually recognize who you are and provide you with content that's very curated to your specific interests. So I'm just going to take a pause here. We have a video of a prototype, a proof of concept that we created in conjunction with a company called Bodymetrics. And I'll talk a little bit about this after we watch this video. It's actually quite cool. And it refers to how you can create a personalized experience for your end users. Okay, so in that example, we saw the television scanning someone's body and getting their measurements, and I realized there's some secure or privacy concerns there that perhaps some people won't be appreciate that the computer will actually know my body size. But regardless of that, I think what we're seeing is greater personalization and especially recognition of who you are as an individual, which helps us as advertisers, as clients, to better understand our customers, better understand their needs, their interests, their wants, and then hopefully engage them better by returning back things that they might even be more interested in. So that example is just something that was created very recently, and I guess in my mind, that's kind of the holy grail of retailing, to actually physically put a store in everyone's living room. So with that said, I want to pass this back to Kyle, because I think we're going to talk about the next steps, and now that we've learned the space, now that we better understand the implications and considerations and opportunities, well, how do we go forward with this as UX practitioners?
Okay, so how do we actually do this? So for many of us, connected TV is really still very uncharted territory. Can I just get a show of hands of anyone that's actually working on a connected TV project at this point? Okay, great. And how about just mobile in general, like tablet and smartphone? Okay, cool. Kiosk design, digital out of home. Okay. So I mentioned those just because they're very much come into play here. So the question is, how do we get started with this? So I would like to propose a call to action for UX. One is, and bear in mind, these come from experience with mobile and how we were able to get interest internally and within our organization early on, like back in 2007, and actually get clients interested in this before it actually hit mainstream with the iPhone and Android. So we're proposing that we can do something very similar here, and that is evangelizing. Which means basically creating groups internally within your organization that are dedicated to sharing knowledge across disciplines. So the reason Ed and I are presenting today is basically because we are very bullish on this space. We think that it's the next frontier for user experience, and we created what we call the Smart TV Lab, which is a research group. We use the lab to communicate with all our offices and share knowledge, and this has basically been our format for involving vendors to demo key services. So we're working with Samsung, Google TV, Microsoft, and so on, to have them come in and demonstrate their platform and services. And so last but not least, it's very critical to make sure that we